when it comes to the pecs. So I know that you have that press around thing. What do you think about, like, so sometimes something that I try to do sometimes when I get access to the cable stack in the gym, which is not that often, is so like it's basically a cable fly, and then so basically like bringing like one arm over the other and like kind of just like alternating between the two, and so like kind of like in that way like you're still having this motion, like would that accomplish the same thing, or there's something I'm missing there?
I I personally would just do one arm and then the other, so that basically you could have a consistent arm path every rep, and
Uh-huh.
you'll still get more range of motion even with the cross than when you're doing the crossover. And then you would want to take a path that, instead of more horizontal, right, is going to be somewhat down and up, right? So,
Mm.
I mean, basically, when we're looking at flies, right, as we start to bring the elbow up, we're going to start bias, or we're going to start losing a little bit of pec bias and include a little bit more delta. It doesn't mean it's no pec, but like if you're not getting really much out of the lengthen position in any of the pecs if we're doing this high and across thing, but you're going to get more range of motion if you're coming like, tilt this, if you're coming low. So if you were to do that motion like this, one arm at a time, that would be better than doing it like this, right? And the other
Mm-hmm.
benefit of that is that because you're really pushing across this, you can likely grab with your other arm and have a little bit more stability, and then just hit a constant position, so that your reps are basically all the same rep, and then do the other one, right? Because what you'll see is, if you're starting to add in that motion, is that the likely change in your technique and the likely ability for you to compensate and start maybe internally rotating a little bit more towards the end of your set and using your delta stuff is all going to be higher, versus if you're like, hey, I have this one motion dialed in, and now I'm going to take that motion to, a technical fatigue or a certain RPE or whatever. It's all through that tissue. It's not slightly changing as I fatigue.
Yeah. Yeah, like the only reason why I was going for some sort of like a bilateral one is I mean, so for one, like if I'm imagining how I would do up a press around, like I would first of all have like probably issues with just standardizing the setup, like because like you can always like, I mean, it's hard to exactly position yourself in the same way. So maybe I should ask you that, like, is there, when you're setting it up, like, are there certain things that you're looking for? Like, okay, so in the bottom, I should feel this, like my elbow should be roughly here, whatever at the top, it should be roughly here or there, like some guidelines to standardize things.
So the nice thing about training at these end ranges, or doing it with this specificity, is we can actually find like the slot that is the end of that position, right? So let's go through upper pec here, right? So bring this down
Mhm.
just a little bit more. So to find this position, let's go with the short position first, right? Is what I'm going to have you do is just bring your arm up so that it's just past your mid sternum, okay?
Mhm.
Right? And then you're going to start to bring it across, and then you're trying to pull your bicep up, and you'll find that there's a stop. So if you come to here and then come across, you'll go up, and there'll literally be a spot where it's like, once you go there, your arm just sticks, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then basically you shouldn't be able to, like, it shouldn't want to rotate or do anything. It just, like, it's stuck there, like it can't go anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
That's what we call a slot, or like an end range position there. Okay. So
Mhm.
that's how you know, like, okay, this is now the end position. So now if I wanted to, I could sight down that forearm and figure out where do I want the cable to be, so that I can push to that point. Does
Mhm.
that make sense? Because basically you would
Yeah.
want the cable to be trailing basically just on the outside of your forearm. Okay.
Right.
And so once you have that point, like if I'm here and if the cable was behind me, I would basically turn my body that way, and I would grab something out here, and then I could do that press around like so.
Mhm.
Right. So
Mhm.
so
And
for
that's if
all
you
of
want to
these,
overload. Oh, go ahead.
for all of the end range, or for all these specific divisions, right? This is where the mechanical modeling comes in, is we're actually able to find that slot of like, hey, this tissue goes takes the joint into the most extreme position for this range. And so if we can actually figure out how to orientate and get there, we can know exactly the direction or the end point that you're supposed to be taking that tissue. And everybody will be able to find that based off of their individual anatomy, because they'll have a certain sternum, they'll have a certain amount of this, and they'll have a certain amount of this, and then that will be short for their individual structure.
Right, right. And this is so like the main benefit of having something like a press around. Is it that like you're really like the short position of the clavicular pecs? Like that's the only real way to overload it. Because like I'm guessing that the stretched position, like you would get like some of that even with like a dumbbell press. Or am I wrong about that?
Yeah, so the press rounds in general, their pros are, one, you just get a lot of range of motion, period, right? So like there isn't an exercise that covers more range of motion in one movement, right?
Hmm.
And then the second would be, yes, you can basically, it's the only way you can get it fully shortened, right? Like even in a fly coming across, you're not going to get it because you have to actually have a soft bend in your elbow and be pushing up this way, right, to be able to
Right.
achieve it. So it's the only way that you can get fully shortened. Now, overload is different than position. So overload implies that the resistance challenges there is hard. Position requires that I'm taking it to that degree of motion. So for instance, a leg extension trains the short position of the quads, but the cam on it is going to affect where the overload is, right? It could be heavy at the bottom of the leg extension or the top. So that's overload. Position is where within the muscle's range of motion am I actually training. Now, in
Hmm.
terms of the lengthened clavicular pec, you could, yes, you could use a press, you could use a dumbbell press, you could use a machine press, or you could literally just turn yourself in the cable machine and do a cable press from that position. So if I was setting up to train this position and the cable is behind me, I would be turned this way to do the fully shortened position, right? But if I
Yeah.
wanted to still just use that same cable and like post exhaust or add reps, I could literally just turn so the cable is more behind me, and then I could basically be doing like the rep, but I would miss out on some of the short range, but now it would be better for the lengthened range. And that can be a strategy if your gym is busy or whatever, or you just really like being able to set up the movement precisely with the cables, is that you could do a press around, but it's focused on the lengthened portion of the range rather than the shortened portion of the range, and you could do it right there. The disadvantage
Yeah.
of the press arounds is there is a bit more of a stability and loadability challenge to them than, say, if you have a really good machine press, right? So it's
Yeah.
back to that, like, okay, the press around is going to be an exercise where I can get a ton of range of motion and maybe I can get into positions I can't get in other exercises. But maybe, my other exercise, I want to pick something that's extremely stable and easy to load so that I get that either just lengthen position or I'm just able to mechanically load it better.
Yeah. 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 No. Um, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, just you mentioned rotation. That reminded me. So first, jumping back to the lats, like how much do you think? I mean, obviously it matters, but like for example, on a pull down, like which type of grip, and on a row and on a pull down, how much does it matter? Like if it's a neutral grip or pronated, supinated?
Okay. So technically, the pronation and supination on its own is irrelevant, meaning that it doesn't matter. Now, where it can matter is if the grip that you choose changes the arm path that you take, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So that's where it's like maybe you use a certain grip because it's just more comfortable, or it just cues you into taking the right path, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or in the example of the press around, you use the grip that orientates it so that the cable is comfortably on your forearm and it's not wrapping around your forearm or whatever. So could you do a pull around with a semi-supinated type grip? Yes. Could you do it with a neutral type grip? Yeah. If you pronate, it's probably like you could physically do it, but likely you're going to want to push the elbow out
Yeah.
instead of bringing it in tight to your body. So basically anywhere between neutral and semi-supinated is likely going to be ideal for any sort of vertical pull. For horizontal pulls, it's going to be mostly neutral with maybe some slight pronation on it, is or we'll say semi-supinated to semi-pronated is probably fine for like as you're starting to get into the more of the horizontal pulls. But mainly that is just because that's kind of we'll say an unconscious cue to help you with the elbow path, right? But the
Yeah.
grip itself is not changing what muscles are being recruited or biased in terms of the lats versus the delts and et cetera, right?